Mark with Macroscopic Solutions, and what we're going to be photographing now for you is the same black specimen that we had before. So this is a bumblebee. Only this time what we're trying to do is capture a full lateral view. So basically a pretty standard 2D image of a specimen that would be housed within a museum collection. So we're not magnifying this specimen at all. And the specimen also sort of has two challenges associated with it. One is it's very dark in color, almost black. And the second is that there are characteristics on this specimen, such as the hind legs and so forth, that are incredibly shiny. So basically, we're gonna have some trouble trying to get rid of glare on an image like this one. So now what I'd like to do is just sort of walk you through how to do that, or at least mitigate that when capturing images. So the first thing I'm going to do, we're using the exact same camera. We've rotated the specimen into a lateral view, and we've stepped the magnification down from 3x from the headshot that we had for the video, which is just how to image dark specimens, and we're now down to 1x. So I'm going to power the camera on now, and the EOS utility is going to open up directly on our computer. Once opened, we just want to take a look at our settings. We want to confirm that our camera is out of manual mode and into automatic mode for the purpose of setting up the image. So the camera is now in automatic mode. We're going to open up our live view shoot. We don't need to change our folder in any way. It's still going to go through to the same folder that we had before. It's just going to create a new folder. We'll turn on our stack shot. So you can see we have the specimen completely within the frame. For this particular image, since it is going to be very similar to what many of my customers are going to be doing, we're going to add the gray background. So we're going to add the neutral gray felt. And what we want to do too is I want to emphasize that on this particular specimen, we have one of the wings that's open wide and another one that's actually closed and runs along past the thorax and abdomen of the specimen. So I rotated the specimen to get the side where the wing is not sticking out because we want less depth. We also don't want to go all the way to the back of the wing. It's so oblique that you're not going to reveal any information anyway. So why go all the way to the very back when you don't need to? So you can see where my focal plane is here. I'm about halfway down that wing. Okay, so with that, we're already kind of at our starting point. I just want to make sure that I have all of the legs just barely out of focus, which they are. So I'm going to change the set start, make this as the starting position. We're going to move the specimen away from the camera until everything just starts to go out of focus, just like that. And we're going to make that our end position. So you're going to press set. Okay, because we're at 1x, basically the focal plane distance on this is 400 microns. So I've already set that on the stack shot. We want to take our camera out of automatic mode now that we're set up from the starting and end points for the focus stack. And now we want to set up the camera settings. We're going to close our live view window. We're going to open up a quick preview. We're going to turn our flash on. Make sure that we give it power here. Okay, there we go. And now the first thing we want to do is just fire a test shot. So I'm at f4, 1/200, ISO 400, and we've got our flash, I think, at 1/64. So we'll take a test shot here. Okay, so already you can see what we're going to be up against. You can see here that the hind leg is extremely reflective. It's reflecting a lot of what's coming off the front of the diffuser. Now, just want to emphasize, it's not necessarily a bad thing that the diffuser is being reflected off of the specimen. That, in essence, is showing that that specimen is reflective in those areas. Without it, it might be a characteristic that's either missed or overlooked. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but of course, let's say that there was important information there that you wanted, and you'd rather not have the glare. We can start to do a couple of things just to see how we can work with this. So the first thing we're going to do is just experiment with sort of moving our flash heads around. So I'm going to move it back a little bit, so further away from the light dome here. And we're also going to move it so that there's a bit more distance between the flash heads and the diffuser. Just try to sort of spread out light just a little bit more. So let's take another test shot. It might be a bit darker now. Okay, so it's a little darker, but it actually did not help glare at all. So now what we want to do is actually start to point our flash heads a little bit more more to the dome to make that diffuser a little less bright. Let's take another picture and see how that looks. You see how that went away? Yeah, the glare was extremely, extremely high when I'm shining light directly at the front of the diffuser. But if we sort of aim light a little bit away, so now the light's a little bit further back off the dome, you can see how much of a difference that makes in terms of just sort of removing any and all glare. Now we're still going to have glare, of course, because it's virtually chrome on that area of the specimen. So the next thing to do now is just take a look at the contrast. Personally, this looks decent, but I think that it needs to be a little bit brighter just to make sure that the thorax and the body and the abdomen isn't going to sort of just be one dark blob. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our flash, make it a little bit, locked at the moment, there we go. Instead of 164, we're going to go right in between 164 and 132. Make it a little bit brighter. The glare might come back a little bit, but not a tremendous amount. The other thing too I kind of want to show is that you might be able to tilt the specimen forward a little bit. So I'm actually just going to pop the top off here of the dome so we can access it. Now it could be that the leg is actually completely parallel to the diffuser. So if we're to just sort of tilt the specimen back a little bit, it might actually reproject the glare towards a different direction. So it could be another sort of method and thing, another sort of tool that is available to you to sort of reduce glare. So let's try that. We've tilted it a little bit. Take another picture and keep an eye right here. Okay, so it actually looks like that emphasized the glare a little bit more. So let's try it the other direction. So this way the leg's going to be a little bit more up in the air. Okay, let's try that. Okay, so now you can see what's happening is the glare is actually kind of moving to the outside. So the center is actually going to be a little bit more, better placed. So let's actually leave it there. We're still going to get a little bit of glare, and I think here we're as close as we're going to get before having to just sort of adjust and show how we can really just get rid of it altogether using post-processing like Photoshop. All right, so from here we are completely set up. We just want to delete the few test images that we've just captured. So those are here. And go ahead, we're going to press start and we can watch this stack. I'll speed it up for everyone, but we'll press start and get this running. It's going to All right, we've just captured all the images needed. So we're going to minimize this screen. You can actually turn the camera off altogether if you're not taking any more images. Okay, and we are going to title the end numbers of this folder 2-1x because 1x was the magnification that was used. We're going to open up Zareen Stacker, drag our folder into the input files section, and we will begin to stack these 41 images. Okay, this image is finished stacking now. You can see even before we're going to pull this into Photoshop and edit, you can see that the details, so that being the texture on the hind leg, despite there being a significant reflection here, are still very, very vivid and visible. In fact, the reflection almost sort of revealed some of the texture that is missing from where it's darker. So technically speaking, and from a scientific point of view, it's one of those things where, no, you don't want glare to destroy the image or basically cover up important information or important characteristics that could be significant for your observation. But in this case, what it does do is it shows that this particular part of the specimen is reflective and also textured. So in some cases, we are trying to reduce the amount of glare, yes, but I just want to sort of emphasize why it's not necessarily such a bad thing. But at the very least, what we are going to do is we are going to save this image and pull it into Photoshop and show you some techniques to sort of get rid of that. Okay, so I'm going to save the output image. We'll save it right into the same folder where we stacked. Do not need Zareen Stacker anymore after this. All right, and now we're going to open up Photoshop and begin editing. Okay, so now we can see what our specimen looks like. We have a bit of our stage that's showing. We have a little bit of our stage that's showing over here to the left as well. And this is, this is even at 1x magnification. So you can see it, for the most part, it does clear the shot, which is really quite nice. But if you don't want it there, you just grab the eyedropper tool, sample the background, make your paintbrush nice and large, and just gently sort of roll over that section. You can do the same. You could do the same down here at the bottom if you didn't want that area revealed either. If it's a little bit not faded enough, you can change the opacity at the top. So it's at 100%. Now we're going to go to 50%. And that can balance and tone it out just a little bit more as well. Do the same thing on the top. And if you wanted, you could remove the pin altogether if that was what you're after. But either way, you can see that did not take very long. All right. Also, just want to show people, I used the clone tool when we were at 3x. I just want to show people how that works again. So that's this stamp tool. You can see me click that on the left. If I'm to hold down Alt down here on the pin, what I'm doing, or even up here, that's up is a bit better. You can see what I'm doing. I'm sampling this region. And now if I'm to enlarge the area where I'm brushing, I can then copy or replicate that area in order to remove different areas or different parts. You can see I kind of went a little bit too far. We'll just click down there. And now what I've done is I've removed that blob, which is kind of a bit of an eyesore. There's also an area that's been duplicated since I used the clone tool, so I can just get rid of that using the Band-Aid tool and so forth. But now let's focus on the task at hand, which is to make sure these dark areas are seen without ruining the integrity of the image. So here, before we do anything, before we do any sharpening, contrast, the first thing we're going to go to is actually shadows and highlights, because we want to get a feel and a handle for what it is that we need to change. So on shadows, we do have these areas that are quite dark. But let's also be real, this is a bumblebee. It's going to be dark and hairy, and those hairs are going to reveal or basically hide anything that's behind it, just like it would if you were photographing a dog. You photograph the hairs because that's in the foreground. It's what you see. Even though humans have significantly less hair in some people, hair, again, is what you see. So just keep that in mind if you're trying to sort of really get through the hair and see features that maybe, again, you don't really need to reveal. But in this case, we could brighten the hairs a bit, add a little bit more information. So I would actually, I would increase the amount of, try and remove the shadows by about 5%. I would increase the radius to 75 pixels, and I'd drop the tone probably down to 10 or 11%. There we go. So that way it's not overkill. If you drop the tone, then when you do manipulate shadows, it's not such a significant change. It's not one that washes it out. It's not one that's destructive. So you can see how much more subtle it is now. This is the standard. This was as it was taken. This is introduced at 5% to sort of get rid of the shadows. So we brightened areas that are much darker. Highlights, for example, are now going to take into account those areas of glare. That's kind of what the highlight feature is for. So you can look at this area and you can look at this area, and as we change and manipulate highlights and tone, those should change. Although I will admit, in this particular example, it's not picking up on them so much. So there's something else that we can do. What we'll do is kind of set this back down to, you know, something close to where it was. In fact, we'll just make it 0% so that part's not being changed. We'll press OK, and I'll show you a different idea or a different method. So once that's done, now what you can do is start to select an area. So we're going to select this area right here, which has, you know, a bit more glare, and this is the part that we're going to focus on. Now, if you were to edit the area that is being selected and edit that area alone, you're going to have a really sharp band of contrast around the border, the area that's been selected, and it's going to look really goofy when you're all done. So you want to sort of overshoot the area by a tad, like as I've just done, and you also want to change basically the way that you do select this. So what you can do is almost gradiate the edge so that as you make changes, it looks more subtle and a little bit more uniform. So in order to do that, you select Modify. You want to go to the border, and you can change the border. So let's just say you want to push it out by 10 pixels. You can do that and press OK. You can see we basically isolated the border, but we're going to go back a step because we don't want just the border to be changed or modified. But we will go back here. Now we want to smooth out that area. So what I just showed you when I did 10, that's the width of 10 pixels around that border. So I think here what we're actually going to want is something closer to 15, make it a little wider. And this is going to smooth over the border so that as we make edits or changes, it's not going to be so obvious in that one section. Okay, select, modify, expand, contract, and we'll also feather that section at a radius of 15 as well for a similar effect. Okay, so now what you want to do is go back to shadows and highlights. And now any change that we're making, you can see really only applies to that one region. You can see also how there's a gradiated effect because I used the feathering tool to the whole outside. So it's not sharp. It's not like right in your face as you change that. So what I'm going to do is move the highlights over quite a bit. Also bump the radius up. See, the radius is actually giving us more glare. Less tone. You can see the glare is starting to disappear there. But then we're also starting to change some of the other colors and characteristics. But now what we have done is we've gotten it down quite a bit. So again, you want to make it so that it's a bit natural. So this is a little closer to the border, but just to give you an example of where we are at, so let's just do 30 and 60% and compare that to 0 real fast. You can see how much that glare was mitigated. Go back to 30. You can see how it's been dropped. And now what I can do is press OK, select, deselect, and there's also not a ridiculous sharp line that made it look obvious that we edited that section. So that's how you would go about sort of editing or at least spot treating areas of high glare. Although as we move forward in these videos, we're gonna basically bring some samples out that have a lot more glare than this. In fact, the next one is going to be a jumping spider's eyes, so you'll see how that works. So now what I would encourage everybody to do is take a look at curves once again. We just changed a little bit, but you do want to bump up the contrast a tad. So that is going to bump up background contrast. If you do the opposite direction here, what it's going to do is it's going to bump up and level out contrast of the specimen. So you just want to play with this a little bit. It seems like, yeah, both of the area, like basically right here. So if we go actually under on both, that actually is giving us a more balanced look than if we were to modify that line. So you just want to play around, again, mostly with those 2 points just to see. But that, again, is looking like pretty good contrast. The last thing, what I might do here is actually, even though I said I don't like to use levels that much, just modify it slightly. The outer, make it a little bit darker, give it a little bit more contrast. And then what we'll also do is sort of brighten up the background a bit. But there you go. So even here at that level, you can still see that the yellow part of the abdomen is still, we have a defined line. Nothing bleeds into the background, and we haven't lost any information for a 1x contextual shot. While I'm here, what I might do too is just add a scale bar so everybody can see how that is done. So on our desktop of the computer, we have a source folder that everybody receives with some scale bar files. We know that this image is photographed at 1x magnification. We have a light background, so we want a black background. What we'll do is we'll just enlarge the file to match the resolution on the camera sensor. Magnification is identical because the image is cropped the same way. So therefore, we're going to have a correct scale bar. And if you remember when I held up the specimen on the little cube, we said it was about 2.5 centimeters long. So here's 0.5 millimeter, 1 centimeter, 2 centimeter, 2.5. So pretty spot on there with scale bar. So now what we're going to do, we're just going to save this image. And end there. So we'll have this image up on our Flickr account. We'll also add it to our Adobe account, and we will make this video live on YouTube coming shortly. Thank you very much for watching.